Now, today on the Young Turks, we have a great guest for you guys. Wil Wheaton, star of Stand By Me, Star Trek The Next Generation, which I only watched every single episode of. He's also, by the way, voice actor on Family Guy. He's also voted or declared the 14th most influential web celebrity in 2009 by Forbes. Only has 2.2 million followers on Twitter. Apparently I can keep going for a long time here. All right, so, and Wheaton's Law for gamers, which apparently is don't be a dick, which I didn't know. I can't wait to ask you about. Okay, how that came about. All right, so I want to talk to you about your activism too. You fought against SOPA, and it was terrific work. But let's start at the beginning. Okay, great to have you here, and let me ask you how you got into acting in the first place.
It runs in my family. When I was a little kid, my mom was a commercial actor, and there were times where she couldn't get a babysitter and took me with her to auditions. And I went to an audition with her in like 78 or 79, and they were casting mothers and sons. And someone at the casting office saw the two of us together and asked me to go in also with my mom. I booked the job with her. And it was for Jell-O pudding pops. So for my very first job,
hilarious.
It was great. So my very first job, I got to go on location, which is always really cool. I went up to Lake Tahoe because Bill Cosby was in the commercial. Bill Cosby was also doing shows at like Harvey's or Harrah's or something like that. We shot in the middle of winter on a golf course that they like spray painted green. I ate my weight in Jell-O pudding pops.
This had to be the greatest thing ever. How old were you at the time?
I was 6.5 or 7.
Okay, you're 6.5. Did you meet Bill Cosby?
I did.
You meet Bill Cosby, you get your first acting job, and you get all the pudding pops you're gonna eat.
Yeah.
So then you think acting's like the greatest thing that ever happened.
Yeah, I have to be honest, it really sort of upset the curve, right? Like it was very weird. It was and then it sort of settled into the grind of being a commercial actor for a really long time. And when I was around, I want to say when I was around 10 or so, I did this commercial for Duncan Hines brownies, and I worked with this director. Who we had all been told before we got to the set, listen, he's not very good with kids. He's directing 17 kids.
Might have gone with a different director.
Yeah, right? And I just thought, well, that's odd. And he just screamed at me the entire time. And I said to my mom at the end of that day, I don't want to do commercials anymore. I think I want to go try to do movies. And we went and talked with the theatrical agent at the agency, and she signed me, and I did some acting classes, and then just worked.
How'd you get Stand By Me?
I just auditioned for it.
That's it. Boom. Yeah. They picked you out.
Yeah. The story, and I don't know if this is true, but the story is that I was one of the first kids Rob saw for the role of Gordy, and the story is that he said to one of the other screenwriters who was in the room, well, it can't be this easy. We need to see other kids, and then went and saw everybody all over the country for it.
Wow.
I don't know if that story is true because I've just heard my mother tell it over and over and over again, and like I'm a dad, so I know how over time the myth kind of takes on a life of its own. But I went through a bunch of callbacks, and I remember for like sort of the final callback, they were sort of mixing a bunch of different kids together to figure out like kind of who had the best chemistry and who was going to really be those 4 kids.
At the time, did you know what kind of a big movie it was going to be?
No, not at all. I turned 13 during production, and I remember that we all kind of thought we were working on something special. The work felt really good. The storytelling felt very real, and there was just something about the way we all kind of connected to our characters that made it just a special sort of experience, and none of us were expecting or were prepared for how like it became that sort of cultural phenomenon that year that it came out.
So that's interesting, because what happens next? So you're a 13-year-old, the movie comes out, it's huge. Like, are you going to school? What happens at school? Do all the girls want to date you all of a sudden?
This is great. The movie comes out on August 8th. In 1986, I think. And the only reason I know that date is that it's my wife's birthday. And after we had been dating for a while, she said, I have to tell you that I actually went to see Stand By Me on my 16th birthday.
Oh, that's really fun.
So we saw we saw the movie come out, and then my parents took my brother and sister and me on this like motorhome vacation. And this is before internet. And so we just went on this motorhome vacation through all these national parks and stuff. And we were gone for, I think, 3 weeks. So I came home, and there were boxes of fan mail on the front porch.
Wow, it's funny, ironic, because that's like out of a movie.
Yeah.
You know?
And I was like, asked my dad, like, what? You know, there's boxes for me on the porch, right? In my brain, I'm like, Star Wars figures, awesome!
Right.
And I open it up, like, oh, letters. And then I remember staying up like all night reading these things, and it was a really weird, surreal experience for me.
And did you gain more popularity? Like, how did your life change at that point?
I don't really remember it being very different in like my real life, kind of in the neighborhood and at school, because I was a weird kid. I was awkward, I was uncomfortable, I was super nerdy, I was very like kind of withdrawn and cerebral, I was really sensitive. I was the kind of kid that other kids liked to pick on to sort of raise their social standing.
Really?
And when the
Did
movie,
anybody stand by you?
No one did. Not at all.
Ah, man, it turns out life isn't like the movies.
So it didn't really change anything. The
That's
only thing-
amazing,
the
though.
only
You
thing
would
that-
think like that if you're a star of this big movie and they're like, oh, we were paying. It's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. All of a sudden, you're leading the sleigh. Didn't all the reindeer want to play with you?
No, I was not invited to a single reindeer game. I didn't get to go to the Island of Misfit Toys. The Miser brothers were not able to reconcile because of me. It was really disappointing. But the only thing that did change is that when I'd been in private school, and we moved to La Crescenta, where I ended up sort of spending the rest of my teenage years, and I went to public high school. And I was terrified because I had never, all I knew about public high school, all I knew about high school was what I had learned from watching John Hughes movies, right? So I go to public high school the first day and I'm like, there are not a lot of 23-year-olds here. This is not what the movies told me to expect.
Right, and where in the world is the Breakfast Club?
Yeah, and I just remember feeling awkward and just afraid, right? And everybody in the school knew that I was the kid from Stand By Me. And I was so terrified and so shy and so weird that I just sort of like kept my head down and really kept to myself. And this sort of like what went through the school was that kid thinks he's too good for everybody because he's famous.
Oh, right.
And it began the worst year of my life. I couldn't make friends. I never really found my way around. I found a few friends. And what sort of brought us together was that we all liked science fiction and fantasy and playing board games. And that was like, and I was like, yay, I found the nerds! And we're still friends. All of us are still friends today.
Man, if you liked science fiction and you were waiting for the Star Wars figures, etc., when you got Star Trek: The Next Generation, you must have been ecstatic.
Yeah. There's like, I struggle to express how excited I was when I found out that I was going to get to audition at all, right? Like for Star Trek, really, right? And then I had a callback. I got to meet Gene Roddenberry.
Oh, that's awesome.
And that was just like. I was so excited to meet him that I actually ruined the callback. I sucked. I gave a bad audition, and I got really lucky, and they let me come back and sort of try again. And then just like the DVDs are out now, right? The remastered Blu-ray DVDs, and or I guess Blu-ray discs is what we're supposed to call them. I feel like Sony's lawyers are going to be yelling at me. But they have all of our like makeup tests and our press releases and some of our auditions and things are on these. And I'm looking at this stuff, and I remember being that like awkward, nerdy 14-year-old kid with a really bad haircut, like just. I couldn't believe it. Like, I'm standing in the transporter room.
So what happens when they transport you?
I actually asked Gene Roddenberry that. We're walking down, when we started, our bridge and the captain's quarters and the ready room were all on stage 6 at Paramount. And our corridors and engineering and sick bay, transporter room were all on stage 9. So we're on stage 9 one day, and you would walk in through the stage door, and you'd go actually through a turbo lift. It was cool. They'd take the back off the turbo lift, and you'd walk through the turbo lift, and then you'd be in this long corridor, right? And if you went to your left, you'd be in the transporter room, and if you went into your right, you'd be in sort of like a general enterprise room that they could redress. Then you'd get to this T intersection, and it was the big round corridor. So if you ever watch Next Generation, you see us having these long walk-in talks. It's in that corridor, right?
Always in the same one, of course.
If you go to the left, you would go down to where sick bay is, and sick bay in the first season was actually redressed to be the observation lounge. And then if you go to the right, you go down to engineering. So I'm walking into the set, and I have a scene in engineering. And I walk down to the turbolift, and I'm just waiting sort of like at the turbolift door, and here comes Gene Roddenberry. Now I knew Gene a little bit then. We were friends, and I still had the like hero worship for him, right? So we start to walk down the corridor, and he starts making small talk with me about like how it is to be on the show, and are you having a good time, and are you happy to be here, and that sort of thing, right? Gene is a huge man. Like he was over 6 feet. He was a giant guy, right? And he says, so did you have any questions about the work? Right, like you know, do you have questions about like Wesley Crusher or like the character relationships? And I go, what's it like when you're transported? What's it feel like? How does that work? Like it vomits out of my mouth, right? Like
what did he say?
The guy who made Star Trek's like, you can have anything you want, right? It was like when Homer and Apu went to meet the guy that made the Quickie Mart, you know? You can ask me 3 questions. Are you the guy who made the Quickie Mart? Yes. Really? Yes. Really? Yes. Thank you. Come again, right? So he said, well, you stand in front of the engineer, and you say, energize, and then there's a brief, and Gene talked with his hands like this, there's a brief moment of losing consciousness, like you've fallen asleep, and when you wake up, you're in a new place. And I was like, okay, great. And then we were in engineering.
And you're like, really? Really?
Yeah. So when you watch the first season of Next Generation and Wesley Crusher's like, this is amazing, that's just me. That's awesome. Just like everywhere I go.
I don't know why, but our so we watched, my friends and I in college watched every single episode, and no matter what we were doing, and back then there's no DVRs or anything like that, we would stop and we'd rush home to watch Star Trek The Next Generation together, right? And I don't know why, but our favorite saying was, get the boy off the bridge!
Of course.
And that was you.
Okay?
So I don't know why we were obsessed, but anytime somebody did something wrong, we'd be like, get the boy off the bridge!
Right.
Okay, to give you a sense of what giant dorks we were in college. Okay.
I love that.
So by the way, I should hook you up with a guy who greenlighted Paramount, because we know him. John Pike is the...
Of course, John Pike was great.
Yeah, he would probably know the story of why you were picked, because I've had conversations with him on the show about why everybody was picked.
I know why I was picked.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I actually... so David Gerrold was a writer on the original Star Trek. This is cool. David Gerrold was 18 and he wrote the episode The Trouble with Tribbles.
Oh, really? Oh, wow. Okay.
And I asked him, you're 18. How did you like just have the chutzpah to go and write that episode? And he said, well, nobody told me I couldn't do it. So my son has a creative writing degree and just applied to graduate school for creative writing.
Right.
And I was like, you just have to remember this. No one told you can't. Just keep doing it, right?
Yeah.
So David and Bob Justman were telling Gene, it's not a good idea to have a kid on the Enterprise. It's weird and they're not going to like it, but Gene really wanted families on the Enterprise, right? And he just wanted to bring that dynamic to the show. He wanted it to be less militaristic than the original Star Trek was. And so David had just seen Stand By Me. And David wrote a memo, and I have a copy of the memo that David gave me, where he wrote a memo to Bob Justman and to Gene, and he said, if you're gonna have this character, I think you should really see this kid. He's a good actor. He's very, very popular in Stand By Me right now, and he's gonna bring the teenage girls to the show. And that's like a thing that we want.
Right.
And that's how I got even considered in the first place, was because of him.
That's awesome. So speaking of teenage girls, please tell me that after Star Trek, you got some dates.
No, not really.
No?
No, I
want to transport back in time to help the young Wil Wheaton be like, Will, look up, there they are. They'll enter your holodeck.
when I was a kid, I was so insecure And I was so afraid of people that kind of wanted to get close to me because I was famous then, that I was like instantly suspicious of people. And so I was already a little weird. I was already a little awkward. I was already super, super nerdy. And then I was like not really prepared to be super famous then.
Right.
And I was inherently distrustful of people because I had seen the way that people were weird and tried to get close to my friends who were super famous back then.
Right.
And I could just see these hangers on, and it was just, I was like, I don't want people like that around me.
Right.
And I remember thinking when I was like 17, 18 years old and like meeting some very attractive girl, I'm not going to try to go out on a date with her because she probably is only interested in me because I'm on Star Trek, and it could not possibly have anything to do with me because I'm not interesting. I'm weird, and I'm a nerd, and I'm all those things everybody, you know, all the names that people call me.
So here's the difference between you and me, Will, because I probably would have thought something similar, but then I would think, like, since I'm weird and etc., this is my only chance. So thank God she's interested in me for being on Star Trek.
Right.
Yeah, I'm all in. So, all right. So now you go through all that, and then there's this ironic moment where you're one of the first people hated on the internet, from what I understand. That's what it's in my notes. Okay, I didn't know that before. Yeah. Okay, and then you become this huge player on the internet where you're tremendously respected. So how in the world did either one of those things happen?
I don't know if I'm respected. I know that I just talk a lot. So I don't know if anybody really respects me.
No. Look, people look to you seriously for, like, you know, on serious issues, whether it's soap or other things, you lead on it, and people respect that.
I try. I just think that I'm really lucky that, like, if we're all sort of like in a big cafeteria, every now and then I get to stand up on the table and sort of shout above the noise, and every now and then people will listen to whatever it is that comes out of my mouth, and I just want it to be worthwhile. And I want to set a good example for my kids, and I want to inspire people the way other people have inspired me. So when I have the opportunity to communicate to somebody and communicate to large groups of people, I do take it seriously, and I do sort of try to do my best with it.
Why do they hate you in the first place?
Well, boy, a lot of ink has been spilled over this, and the super TLDR is there were older people than me, like people in college, who were just really hated the idea of there being a kid on the show in the first place. Okay, so there's that, right?
Okay.
So like that's strike one. And then the first season of Next Generation is not very well written. Like we really flail around and kind of try to figure out who we are. There was a ton of turnover in the writers' room that season. There was just a real struggle for the show's identity. And Wesley Crusher was more of an idea than a person. He was sort of like, gee whiz, hey, I solved your problem for you. See you later. Adults, what's up with them? You know, like, and that was like,
so that got under people's
not
skin.
exactly the most sympathetic character in the world, right? And that sort of made him really just like an irritating kind of thing to people who had access to Usenet and bulletin boards and people who were using computers at the time. But people who were my age, who were Wesley Crusher, right? They were really smart. They were like sort of in a weird relationship with people who were older than them, but like they could hold their own in a professional situation, right? And they were like, if you look at first season of Next Generation, I don't know why anyone ever doesn't listen to Wesley Crusher, because he's always right. I mean, it's like funny, I mean, at a point, it's sort of like it's hilarious, right? It's like a sci-fi trope.
You should get that boy on the bridge more often.
I know. Right. So I think that there was this idea where people who loved Wesley were kids. And as a general rule, when you like something, you don't go online and write a 4,500 word screed about how much you love it. Right?
Right. Oh yeah, of course. Especially in the beginning of the internet. I mean, not that it's gotten any better, but there's a lot of hate out there.
Yeah. So sort of, I think that sort of like the baseline calculation that my friend and I use is that comments tend to be sort of like 2 to 1 against you. So if you can get your comments up to even, right, on like I love you, I hate you, you're actually you're going ahead. Yeah. People who are like happy and really like what you're doing, they're like, that was great. Well, I'm going to go on with my life now. You know, they don't go and sit down at the computer.
That should be the second Wheaton's law. Like if you can get to even, you're actually twice as much ahead in the game or whatever. I
Yeah.
wouldn't phrase it that way. Okay, it's a little clunky. Now, speaking of Wheaton's Law, so you're a big gamer, and so how did you come up with the clever line, "Don't be a dick"?
I gave the keynote to the Penny Arcade Expo, which is a really big gamer-oriented convention in Seattle put on by the guys that run Penny Arcade. And it's shortened to PAX, and PAX was created as a response to E3, where E3 was kind of all about the industry and the content creators. And it had reached a point when they started doing PAX where E3 was pretty gross. Like it was obnoxious, it was loud, it did not pay any attention to the people who actually played the games that they were trying to sell, and it was just gross and lame. So PAX was created in response to that, and it was supposed to sort of be like about gamers. And it was a celebration of gaming culture and the gaming community. And I was invited to give the keynote address. And I was really afraid because I felt like I was too old to do it. I felt like no one would care what I had to say. And I thought, you know what, I've got one chance to do something here. I'm going to try to tie together the generations that come to PAX. So I told some stories. When I'm not being an actor, I'm a narrative nonfiction writer. And I told these narrative nonfiction stories that I had written about my life being a gamer, starting with the Atari and Nintendo, and writing my own things in BASIC on the Atari 400. And,
wow, you really were a nerd.
And then, you know, like
you're a bigger nerd than Kim Horton.
staying up all night, playing, having like Stanley Cup playoffs in Sega hockey on the Genesis when I was in college.
Wow, you were even into hockey?
Yeah. So yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So.
Tecmo Bowl I could understand. Did you ever play Tecmo Bowl?
I didn't like Tecmo Bowl.
Oh, come on. The Chicago tight end could score a touchdown every time.
I know. It's that I feel terrible saying this, but oh my God, I hate football so much.
Oh, really?
I hate
now we got
it
issues.
so much.
Why do you hate it?
Because it is boring.
No, you're crazy. They're trying to kill each other. It's fun.
Boring. No, I love hockey and I love soccer because they never stop. I mean,
that's true. That's a fair point.
And I love rugby too. I mean, like you can take. If you want to watch guys, wow, I have respect for you, man, because I'm scared. I love to watch it. You could not pay me enough to get me to set foot on a rugby pitch. Forget it.
Yeah. There's some logic behind that. We used to go to the hospital literally after every game. Like a different, like 3 or 4 of us.
Yeah.
But I got some cuts under my eye and stuff. Rugby's a crazy, crazy game, but you should. It's a little un-American to not like football. You should reconsider that.
Of all the reasons I've been called un-American over the years, that's probably the only one that even makes any sense. So anyway, I gave this speech to Penny Arcade Expo, and I was talking about what it's like to play online games and how playing Halo or any of the Battlefield games or whatever, when you're playing with someone. And they're awful, right? Like, I don't need you to sit there, 14-year-old kid, and show me how many colorful expletives you've managed to teach yourself.
Right.
And I don't need to know how many different ways you fucked my mom. Like, it's like enough already, right? And it's just and the thing that I compared it to was the experience that I had as a kid playing in video arcades. All right, we would play. You would play games against another person, right? If I ever opened my mouth to another human being the way kids playing video games or adults playing video games online would just mouth off to people, I would have gotten the shit beat out of me over and over and over again. So an important part of kind of like my socialization and my learning of sportsmanship and just like not being a dick when you play games was to just like have fun, compete, don't be competitive, and just don't be a dick.
Right.
So when you're playing a game, just don't be a dick. Like, it'll be great for everybody. And it was like this standing ovation applause line when I said that.
Right.
And people started referring to it as Wheaton's Law. Obey Wheaton's Law, don't be a dick, was what people said.
That's awesome.
And like, if that's the only thing that I end up leaving to this world other than like my children, like if that people have that ingrained in themselves, like, don't be a dick. You're being a dick. Okay, I'll stop being a dick. Because everybody knows what that means. I mean, it's really simple. You can't sort of weasel around it, right?
No.
So that's what Wheaton's Law is. And
but that's pretty good because you're making the world a little better when people remind themselves of that, and I think that it's terrific. And you're right. When I see kids playing video games and I don't even know who they're talking. At first, like I'm so old school now. I didn't even know. I'm like, why do they keep yelling this, right? Turns out they're speaking to someone else in a different place in Indiana or whatever. Yeah. And I keep hearing like, I'm going to sexually assault you. I'm going to sexually assault you.
Yeah.
Like, why? Why are you going to do that? Okay.
I had to sit my younger son down. He was playing, I think it was one of the Call of Duty games, and he comes into my office and he's really proud of himself. I raped that guy, and I was like, we're going to have a conversation now about. Like, you tell me what you think that means.
Right.
And he had absolutely no idea, like how profoundly offensive and awful and just fundamentally wrong that entire line of thinking was. And it actually created a really great opportunity for me as his father to like talk about violence and violence against women and the way that we, deal with other people and like what is acceptable and like what sort of like standards you sort of hold for yourself, right? But based on the experiences I've had playing online, there are not a lot of parents having that conversation with their kids.
It certainly appears that way.
And by the way, NRA psychos, video games don't kill people, you jackasses.
Yeah, I mean, look, the point we were making is that there's a ton of video games in Japan and almost no gun deaths.
Yeah.
You know why? Because they don't have guns.
Yeah.
And so the murder rate is massively lower.
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything to do with the video games. It has to do with the guns.
Yeah.
It has to do with the guns. So I totally agree with you on that. So what's driving you these days? In terms of the political issues. I know, as I've said like many times now, SOPA, PIPA, all those things. You oppose Prop 8, etc. Is there a driving issue these days?
I think gun violence is on everybody's mind, and I agree really strongly with Greg Sargent. If the murder of 20 children isn't going to fundamentally change the sick obsession with firearms we have in America, nothing ever will. Mm-hmm. And it is so upsetting to me, like as a father, and just as a human being, and I am cautiously optimistic that maybe this will be one of those times where the president like actually takes a rational, progressive position on an issue and stays there and doesn't just.
Have you been disappointed with Obama?
Super disappointed with Obama.
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying really hard to be understanding. I don't know how I would deal if I were the president and I ran into a Congress that is this obstructionist. Mm-hmm. Having lived in California for as long, I've lived here my entire life, and our state government functions exactly the way that the Tea Party caucus in the House functions. Mm-hmm. There's this tiny rump minority of lunatic Republicans here in California who just refuse to let anything happen. Yep. But there's enough of them that nothing ever happens. And I always thought, like, as California goes, so does the nation, and I just never thought that it would actually break the three branches of government like it has. Mm-hmm. I don't know if and I think the national mainstream media is utterly and totally failing to communicate to Americans how unprecedented and how dysfunctional the last Congress was, and how this like normalizing of negotiating over the debt ceiling is it's insane.
But they've
like
if we
were a parliament, if we had a parliament, the House would be declared dysfunctional, and it would be dissolved.
Right.
Because it's a disaster.
Yeah, no, they've normalized everything. All the articles, this is one of my pet peeves, say, well, you need 60 votes in the Senate. No, you don't. You need 50 votes in the Senate. A filibuster is extraordinary, except they just normalize it. Now they filibuster every single bill, so you need 60 votes.
It's one area where I think that the big behind the scenes movement conservatives, the Koch brothers and Grover Norquist and the Club for Growth and Freedom Works and all of those people, they have done a magnificent job of just destroying the language that we use to talk about how business gets done in Washington.
Right.
They have fundamentally, it's not even just, they haven't just moved the Overton window, right? Like we're in a whole different Overton room now.
It's the first time I've ever heard that.
So
Wheaton's Law number 3.
So considering all of that, I try very hard to be realistic about my expectations for Obama. There are some things where I think that there are issues that I think you just absolutely don't negotiate on. I believe in respecting all 10 of the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And the normalization of torture and drone strikes. I'm appalled that Brennan has been nominated to head the CIA.
Almost no one on TV is saying it because you got the guys who cheer for the Democrats.
He had to withdraw his freaking nomination in 2008. I mean, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy that like what that signals, I think, to the government and to the rest of the world and to the future terrorists that we're currently creating with our drone strikes is that this is okay. This is the way we do things in America. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's healthy, and I really don't think that it's smart in a democracy for all of this stuff to happen very much in secret. Where, like, when Americans travel abroad, we're sort of held accountable for the actions of the most asshole Tea Party House GOP guy, right? But our voice in our government isn't heard.
But on the other hand, they have made it bipartisan, so we are responsible for the drone strikes. The Republicans and the Democrats cheer for it, and we're screaming against it, but John Brennan's going to sail through. Now Obama has normalized it,
I'm hoping that because he doesn't have to run again, and he has a choice to make, right? Like, what's his legacy going to be? Is it going to be like Obamacare, which just should have had some kind of public option in it from the beginning,
right?
Like, or at least maybe start negotiations there instead of starting negotiations in the middle.
No, but Wesley, I just called you Wesley. I can't believe
it has happened to me my entire life.
Okay, sorry, Will. So I watched too much Star Trek. Anyway, seriously, Will, that's the thing, though. I've come to the conclusion that this is what Obama wants.
I know. And
it's not that he's a bad negotiator. He didn't want the public option.
Yeah.
And he's totally okay with signature strikes, which is the drone strikes where we don't know who we're killing. Right. And he doesn't want to punish the banks. A lot of the bankers are his friends and certainly his donors. So I think he's just like, oh, golly gee, the Republicans made me do so. What do you think his legacy is? I know from a United States congressman that flat out asked him the question. Yeah. And he said his biggest desire is to do the grand bargain. Where, by the way, we would cut Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah, which is, it's just, I cannot believe that a Democrat would ever talk at all, even in the abstract, about touching the two most successful programs for taking care of people.
I know.
Who just. I sort of think, I think that there's like a philosophical way like you view America, right? Like, I believe that we're better when we work together than when we all kind of struggle independently. And I'm doing really well. I've had a great few years. I'm nearing the 2%. Take my money and I can't spend it. Let's make life better for people who are struggling like crazy. I can't believe that I live in a country where my Congress would adjourn without taking care of their fellow Americans who were destroyed by a giant superstorm. Like, that's just appalling to me. Right. There's no excuse for that.
And it's greed run amok.
And it's like these people who, like, if I could go back and change anything in history, I would make sure that Atlas Shrugged was never written. I really believe that has created these people who are just, they're selfish, they're unbelievable nihilists.
I honestly think that's just a justification. I mean, they're going to justify their greed in one way or another. The Heritage Foundation, all the right-wing think tanks, they're not there to win the argument. They're there just to give an excuse so that Republican politicians and their rich donors can say, oh, no, I'm doing it based on a policy paper written by the Heritage Foundation, and look at that genius Ayn Rand, and that's my philosophy. No, your philosophy is gimme, 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 and I don't want to share with anybody. Doesn't matter how rich I am. They're selfish pricks. In fact, they could use Wheaton's law. Don't be a dick.
I'm moderately optimistic. I mean, we have, relative to what we've had for a couple of decades, we have a relatively progressive Democratic caucus in the Senate now, and I can't just decide, no, we're screwed. I have to be hopeful that having someone like Elizabeth Warren in the Senate and having Tammy Baldwin in the Senate is going to make a difference.
It's not.
Okay, come on, just let me have that. Let me have that.
No, there is a hope. I mean, look, everybody that watches The Young Turks knows this because I say it so often. The hope is to get money out of politics. If you don't,
absolutely,
constitutional amendment. If you don't do that amendment, we're screwed. I mean, Elizabeth Warren is terrific. Tammy Baldwin's great. But they're tilting against the windmills. It's, at most there's like how many of them? 13 or so in the Senate, that are real progressives. At most, they're going to lose every time.
I don't know. I'm hoping that they'll hold together. If they hold together as a caucus, if we on the left have given this up for almost an entire generation. Like we've just sort of looked at elections at every level, and we've thought, this Democrat sucks, but that Republican is terrifying. All right, I'm going to vote for the Democrat who sucks.
Yeah, that's it, right there in a nutshell. That's the game that's being played on us.
And if we can just hold together and force the sort of mainstream Democrats to stop, like Emmanuel said, punching hippies, and start really thinking about some of the things that have absolutely made America great. And everything that's made America great has been a progressive ideal and a progressive priority.
Yeah, they've lost track of that entirely.
Then I think
because they're rewarded based and they're reelected based on the donors. So we got to change the system. If you don't fundamentally change the functioning system that it's like a computer program.
Right.
If you program that, for example, in Congress, 93% of the time, the person with more money wins.
Yeah.
So what does a rational person do? Raise more money at all costs, right? So if we reprogram it, though, it can give us great results, because when we didn't have unlimited money in politics, we got Nixon to pass the EPA, OSHA, seatbelts. Ralph Nader was the most powerful guy in the country. Remember those days?
Yeah.
So it is possible. So there is that hope, if you ask me. All right, now let me end on a couple of goofy questions.
Okay.
Now, you said that you've got enough money, et cetera. You just said a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
Do you still get money from Star Trek?
A very little bit. I mean, I actually just got a couple of residual checks that were for less than $1.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and
so every time they replay it, you get a tiny amount,
right? A
right?
little bit less, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. So, do any of those things, or is it all the new stuff like Big Bang Theory and stuff?
Do you mean
like revenue-wise? Because once I talked to the guy who ran the Peach Pit on Beverly Hills 90210, Joey Tata, right?
Yeah.
And he said, "Look, I retired on the residuals alone."
You can do that. The deal that we had in place when we did Next Generation, the way the contracts were structured, it was first-run syndication, and it didn't work the way that, like, if you're on a network series today and you work really hard and you get really lucky and you get on one of those like maybe dozen shows that really takes off,
right,
you can work for 5 years and then not have to worry about like paying your bills for the rest of your life. I'm not there yet. I'm working real hard to get there.
Right.
But like I worry about I have to earn a certain amount of money every year so that I qualify for the health insurance through Screen Actors Guild.
Isn't that amazing? And we're all worried to death about health insurance. Yeah. That's what it is. Like, I know people, in a huge TV executive came out of retirement because his wife got sick, and he's like, "Oh my God, I'm desperate for health insurance."
Yeah.
It's just, that's a whole other story too.
Every time I hear some jackass in Congress sort of state as an article of faith that the United States has the best anything in the world, but especially best healthcare system in the world, I want to rage quit my life. I mean, I want to go to IKEA, build a table, and then just flip it over and over and over again, because it makes me so angry when I
think
hear
you can
that.
just do it with an old table. I don't think you have to get a new table. But that's funny, because I just learned from Kim, who does Nerd Alert for us, what rage quit is today. I didn't know what that was, and boom, here we are using it. Okay, before we rage quit this interview,
yes.
Do you hang out or talk to any of the old Star Trek
I talk
actors?
to everybody from Star Trek.
Oh, really?
We're all very close.
Even Diana Troy?
Yes, everybody, all of us.
Did you have a crush on her back then?
I had the hugest crush in the world on Marina when I was a teenager.
Oh, of course, right?
It's a funny thing that we joke about now. But yeah, I had a gigantic crush on her. We are. I'm really lucky that I have a movie like Stand By Me in my body of work. Actors will go their entire careers and like hoping to achieve something like that. And I'm doubly lucky to have spent my formative years on Star Trek: The Next Generation, because I worked with this group of actors where we were all very close friends. We were very much a family, and we were. It's been 25 years, and we see each other once a month.
Wow,
yeah,
really?
Yeah, I mean, we're
Picard?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's great. Patrick actually moved back to the United States. He was living in England, and he did a couple of years of just doing live theater in England. And he moved back to the U.S. and I think he lives in New York. But I see him this last year was the 25th anniversary, so a bunch of different Star Trek conventions sort of got us all together to go and do things together, and it was great. It was like we never stopped the show. And for me, really, it's the best thing because I'm an adult now. I'm 40. I have 2 adult children, and when I was a kid, I really, really wanted to like hang out with those guys because they were so cool. They were my role models, like they were my friends, and it was like having 9 parents, and like I looked up to all of them so much. But at the end of the day, I would go home and listen to Depeche Mode and Joy Division and play D&D and go do nerd stuff with my friends, and they would go out to dinner and drinks and a jazz club or whatever, and like our lives were just so different.
Of course.
And it created all this angst in me, because I wanted to be like them, I wanted to hang out with them, and I didn't have that. It's one of the ways I think Wesley would have been a more interesting character if they had written some of the turmoil that I had into the character.
Right.
That it would have made him more sympathetic. And this last year, getting to see them as much as I have, I finally got that thing I always wanted, where we all went out to dinner together, we all went to a bar together, we went and listened to music together.
And was it as good as you had imagined?
It was even better. It was great because people were at gates like, I'm having a problem with my computer. Can you handle this thing on my computer? I helped Frakes when Frakes' email got hacked. And so I texted him and I said, dude, your email's been hacked. You've got to log into your account and change your password. And he was like, can you help? So he texts me back, can you help me fix this? And I said, yeah, I can. So I asked him what his email client was, and I talked him through all of it. Now, whenever I get a text
Ironically,
message,
you were being Wesley Crusher.
Right. So whenever I get a text message on my smartphone, it's the original series communicator sound because I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, so I love that. Right. Yeah. So I'm on this little smartphone, and as I'm typing on it, I realize that Frakes and I are talking to each other on a device that's visually inspired by a piece of wood that we held 25 years ago on the set of Next Generation. And every time I get a message, it's making a Star Trek sound, right? So I made some reference, some joke about how Wesley Crusher and I weren't all that different after all. And then he made a Star Trek reference, and I can't remember what it was. And I said, all right, so let me know. I said, I need you to open up a terminal and run this command, and then just tell me what it says for your CPU output. Right. And he said it's up in the red. And I said, that's good. It means that your processor is working and it's cleaning out all of this stuff. And he says back to me, I'm giving it all she's got, Captain. and I was like, engage. And it was. And then I was like, oh my God, I just had the biggest nerd moment of my life.
No, look, for those of us who watched it, I mean, we like all the make it so's, and my favorite line from it ever is, what would the Picard think? When they thought he was God. And I loved every bit of it. The fact that you got to live that out as a person who loves it and was a part of it is terrific. Now, one last thing here. Yeah. You're on online shows as well.
Yes.
So, Geek and Sundry show Tabletop. I think we have a clip from it, and then I want you to explain it.
Okay, sure.
All right, let's watch it real quick.
Morheim and Felicia Day are here because something has been awakened. I think I'm going to try and go to the hedge maze. Amanda.
You are a pretty little girl, by the way.
I know, thank you very much. Don't objectify me. Here we go.
Red guy.
Yeah, here we go.
That's fun. So tell us about that.
So Felicia Day and I have been friends since we were both at the Acme Comedy Theater up in Hollywood. And when she created the Guild, one of my writing partners from Acme was producing it. Mm-hmm. And she emailed me and she said, look, Felicia did this show, The Guild, will you just put it on your website so people can know about it? Mm-hmm. I was like, yes, because everything Felicia, because she's great. She's super talented and incredibly creative.
That show is very popular too.
Yeah.
Right.
So I sort of helped promote it in the beginning, and I'm really proud to have been part of that. Mm-hmm. And a couple of seasons into it, she asked me if I would come and play the rival guild leader, Fox. So this really did. She said, "I want you to play a douchebag in a kilt," and I was like, "I can do that." so we did that together. We did 2 seasons of the Guild together, and when Google was giving out grants to people who were going to produce slates of programs, she called me and she said, "So we're just going to try it. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we're going to try it, and I've got to give them a whole bunch of ideas. Do you want to do a show together?" I was like, "Yes, of course." And she said, what do you want to do?" And I said, I have no idea. What do you think?" And she said, "Well, I know that you like to play a lot of board games, so what about a show where you review board games?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, like, reviewing board games, like I am so sick of the sound of my own voice. I don't want to sit there and talk to the camera about it. What if we played them instead?" And it was like, that was remember those magic eye things at the mall where you'd look at the picture and it was just noise, and then your eyes would cross and it's the space shuttle and it's in like 3D. So like I said that and I was like, "Oh my God, we're gonna play games together. We're gonna get our friends who are actors and writers and musicians and creators and celebrities, and we're gonna ask them to come and play games with us. So it's gonna be like Celebrity Poker meets Jon Favreau's Dinner for Five with board games." And she was like, "What a great idea." And then the more I thought about it, I thought, this is great. The thing that makes me happiest in life is playing games. It's the foundation of the most important and longest lasting friendships in my life. It was an incredible bonding experience with my children. It's a great way to make friends. It's like, game theory is so important to get anything done. There are so many times when I'm watching the Senate, and like, none of these guys play video games. Like, they have no idea. None of them know what they're doing. These guys could not clear 2 levels of Tetris.
That's the least of their problems.
So I just thought, this is going to be great. This is a way that we can show people who don't play games why games are great, and this is a way where we can show people who do play games that people who they like to watch on TV also do it. And it's been a huge success where we get it's like 350 and 500,000 viewers on just about every episode we put out.
That's awesome.
We've done dice games and card games and board games. We've done wonderful RPGs. We're about halfway through the first season. We're very, very hopeful that we're going to get a second season. Like, we're we're working really hard to do it.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
And it's been great. I'm really proud of it. And if you had told 16-year-old me that 40-year-old me was going to get to play board games and that was going to be like our job, 16-year-old me would not have believed you and would have immediately gone back to playing Contra on the NES.
By the way, I love board games and I love poker just like you two. And I don't think about Tetris, but when I see Harry Reid or Obama in the negotiations, I think, man, I'd love to play poker with these guys.
Right, he's like the most tight, weak poker player that I've ever seen in my life.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, he could have a pair of kings, and I could get him to.
But you get him to throw away any hand.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. It's a pair of queens. Oh my God! What if the guy has aces?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. One of my poker mentors calls that monsters under the bed. Right? Like, you're looking at a really strong hand, but there's probably one hand that might be a little better than yours. And unless you're playing Omaha, like, you bet your second best hand as much as you can. Right?
Obama would never do that. No. Would never do that. One last question for you on games then. My favorite game when I was growing up was Power Barons. Are you familiar with that?
Power Barons. God, yeah.
Oh, okay, because one day we should play Power Barons.
Yeah.
Because I brag about how I have never lost. Like, I'm like the only person in the world who remembers Power Barons and who considers himself a Power Barons aficionado.
No kidding. Wow.
So Jesus is actually wanting to do something like your idea. Our director has wanted to shoot our cast playing Power Barons he's been saying it for like 5 years now.
Wow. Is that a game is it even in print still?
No, but a couple of our fans sent me 2 old Power Barons sets, which I have at home now and bust out.
There was a game in the 80s that I loved called Dark Tower, and it was it was by Milton Bradley, and it had this big tower in the middle of the board. It was a fantasy game, and you had to sort of go around this board and get a sword and kill trolls and like buy things at a bazaar. But the key component of this game was this tower that stood in the middle of the game that had a computer in it and a little LED display, right?
Yeah.
And it played music, and you would punch things on it. It was so cool. It was like the movie Heavy Metal kind of like brought to life on my table, right? Unfortunately, without the boobs, but it was still like really, it was really cool, right? And I was talking at a convention about, I was speaking at a gaming con, and I was talking about, I wrote a book called Games Matter, and I was talking about why games are important, and I mentioned how much I loved this game, and someone sent me a copy of it. Like an actual old in the box, you know, with their like little 12-year-old name written inside of a kind of box thing. It's
how cute.
It's one of the best like aspects of the job that guys like us have. Right. Like when we love a thing, that every now and then there's somebody out there who's like, I love that thing as much as you do, and I have an extra one, and I want someone who cares about it to have it.
Yeah, no,
It's
we're
great.
super lucky about that. All right, Wil Wheaton, thank you so much for
It's a
joining
real
us on
pleasure,
the
man.
Young Turks. It was a great conversation. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.